Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Monday. It is June 21st. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and it was all uphill today. We had a little bit of a correction right into the 8:30 open, but it wasn't long before this thing started up again. Notice we had this first trend or first leg up, then we had this two-legged, basically got a leg down, a correction, leg down. So it's a two-legged correction. From there, you look for your measured move, and lo and behold, we basically hit that to the tick. I think we've gone higher now. Yeah, we went a little higher, but that would have been a great target. And notice that we got the blue channel working up. It looks like we had a close outside here and then two legs up, but all we really did was kind of fold over into this flatter channel, the green channel. And you'll see that a lot on real strong trend days. They just a lot of times these start out way too steep, and you just can't sustain it that strong of a trend. But another clue that this is a very strong trend day are all the little bars that just keep going higher. Notice all the dojis mixed in there. You just keep going higher and higher and higher. Generally, you want to just try to get on with these kind of trends. As soon as it comes back to the trend line and really gives you a good signal bar, you can almost trade these. We had a few more corrections today than you normally would. We had a little bit of one here from about 10:30 to 11:30. And then once we reached that target, it was kind of sideways the rest of the day. You can see that there. But really, the only way to trade these is if it comes back to the trend line and gives you a pretty good trend or signal bar, you just about have to take the trade. There's because you don't get a lot of, notice you don't really get any real corrections. You won't get a lot of second entries on the bigger corrections. Notice up here we're starting to get some bigger corrections. I just think that we've moved, prices have moved a long way by this point, and we're starting to flatten out even further. But you can clearly see that green channel's in play till we get a break. Um, Pretty good day. Not a lot of entries today because at least not a lot of the easy to spot second entries and things like that with a strong trend. So you're not going to see as many trades here. Uh, you almost have to get a little bit aggressive on these kind of trades and just start taking them. Like I said, anything that pretty much comes back to the trend line or a key entry point with a good signal bar, you just about have to take them. So anyway, let's back out. We'll talk. We'll go through the trades, and there's not a lot of them, so it shouldn't take too long today. But our first trade this morning sets up just after 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock comes right in these few bars right in here. And notice that we had this trend channel working up. We had two legs down right there, and then we started higher again off this midline. And you may not have had, it was kind of, you probably wouldn't have even had this midline yet. You would have just been looking for a retest of the highs on this channel. Yeah, we had a little bit of a close outside here, but that was so early that you would expect this thing to probably go higher, especially after that two-legged correction if you make a higher low. And notice how I marked this first trade. Notice that there's a new low off right here. Even if you didn't have the midline, you'd probably want to just draw a trend line up through there. You could just draw you a trend line like so. So, and it plays out. It moves up, gets a break outside, moves to a new high, and then corrects. So however you looked at it, you should have been able to, if you pull it on down there, but really you need to go off those first few closes and bars. It looks like that to me. That's the way I played it. And you might have even had it like this. It looks like there's a little bit of an overshoot there, but it could be two tiers. You see it fits both ways, and then you close outside, move to a new high, and then down. But anyway, that's the way I originally had it. Was looking at it anyway. But notice you got your low first entry. You push through the MA, you pull back, you get a second entry short, and this actually breaks higher first and then turns down. So you would have to wait for this bar, and then you go long one tick above that, because then it becomes a failed second entry short. Um, That's the way I would play that bar, because it did break higher first. Um, so if you're going to play, actually you could have played it on the break higher there. If you did, you have to put your sail stop or your safety stop down below this swing, because you don't know where this bar is going to go to. So that's the problem on this engulfing bar. It breaks higher, moves down here, and um, if you did buy on this bar and put your safety stop right here, then you would have got stopped out of that, only to watch it go on and work as it would expect it to. So anytime you get a bar that's an engulfing bar like that, you want to put your safety stop under the previous bar. So if you didn't, you would have got stopped out on this one, only for it to turn out to be a good trade. So then prices actually come back and now give you a second entry here. This one's close to being blue because it is a second entry and it is off that key entry point. So I marked it green because with that bar right there with no body, it's starting to look like congestion. There's still enough room to get out before those highs, but it just, if you didn't enter here, then you probably want to be real careful here. It works out, but because it created this no body bar right here, you had to be real careful that this wasn't setting up as a doji. I'm sorry, setting up as congestion because of that bar that looks, and then you get another one that looks like a doji there. So it looks like it's starting to become congested. And you actually get a third entry long right there. So, but if you didn't enter on this bar or this bar, I definitely wouldn't have entered it after that. But it runs on up, you get a break, a new high, and then we're coming back. And this is when I drew the trend line off of these swings here. I originally had it a little tighter. It was a little higher right here, and I caught that. But later on, you can see it fits better. Came back again, it was fitting better, playing it off of that swing right there. And so you might have even bumped it down to here. If you bump it down to here, the only problem is you don't even get back to the trend line. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you still could have played this either way because it's a failed second entry short. But I ended up just tightening it up. I'm not sure which way. It doesn't really change anything much. Anyway, wherever you have it there, I mean, you might have even had it a little tighter right here, and so it could have been more like that. But that's where I think it fits the best. And you can clearly see it plays off the midlines really well in there. Of course, we never really get back to that midline. In the big picture, you're better off playing these shorter term trends and channels than you are this big blue one. So, because the big blue one just doesn't really help you. Maybe right here if you had it like this, but if you didn't, if you drew it off this low or one of these other lows, then you're not hitting this trend line. So, in my opinion, this trend channel just doesn't really help you. You're better off to play this shorter term stuff, just like so. So let's just move it out of the way because that's the better way to play it. But you can clearly see we had that failure there when we moved higher. We were really kind of going sideways here. And that's another thing. This kind of bounces off back inside the support. This was like a failed break lower. You bounce back inside. And when this breaks higher right here, that is a second entry long. Notice the new high, first entry, second entry. But normally you wouldn't take an inside bar like that. But because there's a new low and there's a first entry, second entry, so the minute it breaks higher right there, that's a failure. And again, your safety stop would have to go below the low, so it goes down here. And this one doesn't matter. It takes on off, pulls back, and this is just right in the middle of the range. I think you'd want to wait on a second entry here, and you don't ever get it. We just continue to push higher. And then finally you get a new high, first entry, second entry. And you're way away from the EMA here, been away for a while, but you can clearly see that yellow channel holding and you get a confirmation here on a second entry long, and this is starting to look like a strong trend again. So you may take that trade. I don't see any problem with it. Once you got outside here, I don't think I would want to take any more. There's actually another first entry, and I don't know if this broke lower or higher first. I really don't remember. But it is a second entry long. And then finally, notice you got a new swing low there. It's lower than that one. And you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry that fails. You get a nice bullish bar. It's a little bit close to the highs, but this thing has been strong. And I just think you probably want to take that trade right there. You got to be real careful with it. I'm not sure exactly how much room there was in there. It was real close to being enough. The way you'd probably want to, so you got exactly a point to the highs there, or so. So you got to be really careful taking that trade. It probably should actually be green. In fact, I'm going to change it to green. I liked it because it's a trap, and because this trend had been really, really strong. But we had a break here at a new high already, but you can see we're still making higher lows every single time. And on that trap, this is probably going to break higher. You may let it break higher and drop a limit order just a tick or two back to see if you could get filled, maybe a tick, and then you've got enough room to get out there. I definitely don't think I'd wait and enter on this move right here on the breakout pullback, because you would have wanted it to take on off there, and it didn't do it. Turns out it just keeps going higher. Again, I don't see anything up here that I like. Then you get a correction, and now we're working off the midline of this. You may not have had this yet though either. I originally had this a little steeper, but again I adjusted it because it wasn't fitting up here or on the midline. So I adjusted it a little bit. Again, I was started off playing these, but you can see it comes back into play, and you can clearly see that midline. But again, I think you needed to trade the shorter term stuff here versus the green one. The green one just kind of helps you see it after the fact, because it was really, notice that you've got two swings here, but you don't really come back to it to way up here, and so it just doesn't really help you a whole lot other than this midline right across here. And again, even if you didn't have the midline, just draw the channel like so, and that's all you really need to do. So, and I think it's easier to do it that way than it is to find this green channel. So I hope that's clear. But anyway, you get a break here, a new low, and then you make a first entry short, second entry short. That looks too congestive, going long right into that high. So I don't think you want to take that failure right there. But when it comes down and gives you a second entry long right there, I marked that one green. It is a second entry long, and you do have a trend line coming up through there, but it's an inside bar. It makes a matching low, so you can still use it, but it's not a perfect bar, bullish bar. It's close enough. Let me back out. That's really hard to see. I'm sorry. But you can see it's not a perfect bar, but it's still a pretty decent bar, and you can clearly see first entry, second entry. And probably the better move is to wait on the higher low, which comes here. And again, you can see it off the EMA, off that midline. And if you didn't have the midline, if you drew the trend line, like so, and it takes on off. There's another failure here, but again, you're going long right at the very highs. It would have worked, but I just don't think it's worth it. We run up here, and then we turn back down. Really, here you get your first close here, but it doesn't go higher. There's no setup to go long, but it just keeps going lower. This is when you probably would have looked for, you could have drawn this off these lows here and off these highs, and probably found this with the midline by now. But if you didn't, just play the short-term stuff, and I just don't think you want to go short here. I don't see anything that looks really good on a short at all. There's a failed second entry long here, but that's congestive. It's above the EMA. We really hadn't broke below that trend line working up there. Just not a good place to be going long. Just wait and sit tight. Then we're working down. You get an overshoot, a break, and a few moves to a new low. And at this point, you're really just playing the sideways. And you get a chance to go long off the very lows. Look how many times we tried to get below that and couldn't. We finally pushed below, but guess what? It closes right back inside. I like going long just to try to get a scalp out of it, and maybe the trend starts back. And sure enough, it does. It runs higher again. And notice you got a new low there, and you got a higher low right here. Too congestive looking, but it pushes on out, pulls back, and gives you a failed second entry short. Normally, I probably would have marked this blue, but it's not quite back to the EMA. You can see there's a little gap in there, but it is right off the trend line. So it probably is not going to get back to the EMA because it's right off that trend line. And here you got enough room to get out before getting back to those highs. And you can clearly see it working off that trend line, working up there. We're going higher again. So that turns out to be a pretty nice move. So we run up, and of course you got this channel working up, and now you get your first break. There is a second entry long right there, but signal bar is no good. See how congestive it gets. Again, not a good setup to go short. I don't think you want to go short, but let this play out, and you get a similar pattern to down here. It's not a repeat pattern, but you make a low. You get a couple of tests, and again, it bounces off that possible trend line there. But I like this one mostly because it's a double test of that low. Notice you made that low, you test it once, you test it twice. And there is a new swing high right here. So you're coming down first entry, and there's really a second entry right there, but it's not a very good signal bar. But when it makes that third touch right there and it holds, I think the smarter traders say, okay, we're going higher again. They can't take it lower, and off it goes. And so I like that one just on a triple test and a little bit of a trap there as well. And it looks a little like this trade. Not quite, but it's still a correction that goes sideways and then turns up. Correction that then goes sideways and turns back up. I don't have the little channel there, but there's clearly a little sideways channel right there with a little midline in it. And you can see that working sideways. We find a little resistance, but it pushes on up. And that takes us into 2 o'clock. So you can see there's not a lot of trades here today, but there's a few decent trades. And it's a shame to have such a nice trend and just not get any really strong setups that go very far. That's why I hate days like this where you get a really strong trend, but you don't get a good chance to enter on it. And it's just unfortunate. You just last week was some really crazy trading, and the volatility was back though. You couldn't hardly, if you took if you read the market right and you entered, the scalps were usually quick and easy and over in just a blink. So it was kind of nice to see that back again. And while there's some good movement today, this is a really strong trend. It doesn't look like it because you see all these little bars. So learn to recognize these. I talk about these. We don't see them all the time, but we see them fairly regularly. And you need to learn to spot these, and you need to learn to spot these center points because that would have given you a nice target. And as long as we were working higher, you would still be working towards that target. And you can see how it started to slow down late in the day, but we were still working upwards towards that target. So there are all these small micro channels because it'll really help keep you on the right side, and these little small ranges, because a couple of these trades you probably wouldn't have taken them if you didn't see the support of the little small range. So keep that in mind. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Not much else you can say about this day. It's just a strong trend that had you had this early overnight leg up, a correction, and then from there we made another leg up, and it just took a lot longer and a lot more time to get up there. And I think I called the target at 42.15, and you can see I basically, whatever that is what I called. and I said it was around 42.15, and that's 42.15 and a quarter. We actually went to 42.15.50, looks like. Actually, we got higher than that later in the day. So, but that would have been a perfect target, and it was easy to find. All I did was look for that two legs, your main move up two legs, and I measured it and measured from the bottom of leg two, and that gives you a perfect target. And you could have found that as early as 8:30 this morning. So once you start going higher, you just stick with it. Now, if it would have kept working lower, you would have just kept working this lower too, until you either continue until it looked like we were going to trend lower, or it was going to find a low and move higher. So use those measured moves. They help you. They'll show you where prices are going to go. Like I said, by 8:30 this morning, it was almost a given. If we're going higher, we're going to 42.15, and that's exactly where we went and a little bit further. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow we'll get something that's a little easier to trade. And again, this is not hard to trade. The problem with it is there's just not a lot of setups without being a little more aggressive, because you get these real long and fast moves that are real tight channels, and you don't come back to the EMA, and it makes it a little suspect. And a lot of times you have to go long right into the highs, which you normally don't want to do. But on a day like this, you just won't have much option a lot of times. So you just keep that in mind. And there's probably some more in here you could argue for to be at least green, but they're probably going long right into the high or something of that nature. And I just, unless it's a sure enough trend line or second entry or failure or something, I usually just don't mark them, because it gets too confusing. Because tomorrow the market won't be nearly as strong, and somebody will say, well, you showed a trade like that yesterday that looked just like that. But you got to understand, we're not trading patterns, we're trading the context. And the context today, this is a very strong uptrend. It doesn't look like it, but when you see all these little bars working higher and higher and higher with very shallow corrections, that is a strong uptrend. And on days like that, about the best opportunity you're going to get is any good solid signal bar that comes back to the trend line. And you can see whenever you got a good signal bar, really, that came back to the trend line, there's one. That's not a good enough signal bar. That one's decent. Anytime you got a good one that came back, prices, they tend to work. So there's one, but you got a clue, because we didn't get back to the high. We just barely pushed through and pulled back. So you'd probably want to wait on second entry there, and when it comes, you don't get a good setup. So there's always clues. You just have to look for them. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We're way over 20 minutes here. Hope you had a good trading day. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. Again, for most of you, they're probably aware by now there was a CQG issue today, so that was another thing. By the time I actually got word that it was done and over, it was almost lunchtime. So I really didn't even get a chance to trade today. I just watched a little bit of this in the afternoon. So I watched it this morning and saw some of these setups, and I thought, man, I wish I could get in on these. But if you use CQG, there was an issue, and they couldn't close. It may take some issue with the margin. I don't know what it was, but by the time they got a fix for it, it was noon, and they weren't going to get the true fix for it until tonight. So they had a workaround by noon or so. But hopefully everything's good to go tomorrow. We'll be back on track. We'll get a good trading day. We'll have to see. But I'll be back tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.